guys, in today's Food Friday, I'm going to talk about how you should eat, and I'm going to give you a couple of nutritional habits that you can implement, into your eating regime. I'm going to use fat loss as an example, but you can apply the same type of methodology, and the rules pretty much are quite similar when it comes to muscle building or maintaining. Might be a couple of changes in each habit, but it's pretty much the same. Now, when you're eating for fat loss, what's most important still, no matter what you might read in the newspaper or what new type of diet or trend comes out, it's still the total calories that you get in. What's going to determine fat loss or building muscle is the difference between how much calories you expend every day and how much you take in, which is simple science really, and there's nothing else that will determine fat loss or muscle building. Technically speaking, I think we could say it's not necessarily as much the calories that you take in through your mouth, but it's more so the calories that you absorb through your food. Certain type of food combinations or certain type of conditions where your gut, you may not be able to absorb everything that you eat, but the energy balance equation maintains. And anybody who says that it doesn't, and that you can eat more calories than you expend and still lose weight, it's a lie. Unless that person is smarter than an Einstein or something, and they've refigured out energy balance or something, and they're able to create energy out of thin air or destroy it out of energy without energy moving from one form to another. So unless they can do that and defeat pretty much the scientific history of the past couple of centuries, then it's not valid. It's energy in versus energy out. So as I said, total calorie intake is the most important. Having said that, I'm not personally a big fan of calorie counting for so many different reasons. The most important one being that it's not really sustainable, and it's not fun either. I mean, unless you're like one of those persons who can meticulously, count the calories of every single thing that you put into your body. Again, it's not what you absorb. That there can be quite a bit of difference. And you enjoy putting that into whatever calculator or something, and you want to continue doing that for the rest of your life, if that's you, great. And if it works for you, do that. Personally, even when I'm at 10% body fat and I'm getting down to extremely low body fat levels, I still will not count my calories, and I'll still be able to reach my goals. And it's mostly through certain nutritional habits that I follow, and through being able to to understand what I'm eating, pretty much, often just through looking at it. But I'm going to say looking at it, I can sometimes look at if it's pure food, if it's singular ingredient food, like a piece of meat, and I can more or less know how much protein or calories will be in that, or how much that I'd need. I'm also a big believer that you just listen to your body, and your body kind of will tell you when you're too full, or when you still need to eat more. Yeah, so I'm using that as a primary gauge. Of course, the more processed foods you eat, the more sugars, the more stuff that is full of fats and all these additives and stuff. That's going to kind of trick your systems and into thinking that you might be eating less than you're actually eating, or vice versa. So that can make things more difficult. But I do recommend for everybody once in their life to maybe spend just 30 days or something, and then maybe just for that duration counting and weighing all the foods that you eat, and determining how many calories that you're eating, just to have an understanding of how many calories approximately, how much proteins you're getting into a day. Yeah, but to do this and to track every food for the rest of your life, definitely not sustainable, and it's not fun. It's something that I think is reserved for coaches, and even then the coaches who guide people to get ready for photo shoots or stage ready and stuff. But otherwise, it's not necessary. Another reason why it's not really necessary is because, calories, determining how much calories you need and how much you expend, it's an estimate, and it's an estimate that can be off by 20 or 30%. Again, for so many different reasons. As I mentioned, it's not just what you take in, but it's what you absorb. But also there's difference, it also takes energy to burn different types of food. For example, it takes much more energy requirements from your body to digest protein as it does carbohydrates, for example. So you might be eating the same number of calories of protein as carbs, but you're actually gonna use more energy and expend more calories, digesting the proteins. So these are things that you have to take into consideration also. Again, there's also, genetic differences between people. People's metabolism can adapt to what they're getting into their lifestyle, to their activity levels in different ways too. So there's that also to take into account. Plus also, even if you do get a number, your daily activity, things change from a day-to-day basis too. Not just what, the food that you take in changes too, unless you're going to eat exactly the same thing every day, and you're going to move about differently every day too. And that can be, that can sometimes be a difference of easily 700 calories. So what are you with a perfect calorie count that you should be taking in? I do think it's good to have that estimate and then start with that estimate, but then also as you go on to then change things to your diet and your calorie intake based off of the results that you're having so far. So it is good to kind of understand, okay, how many calories does your body need to just move about every day to just stay alive. If you want the most accurate way, I've done this recently, is you get a DEXA scan done, something like that. And for me personally, for example, my resting metabolic rate is just under 2,000 calories. So if I do nothing during the day except for just sleep and not move, I burn close to 2,000 calories. So but with all the extra activity levels, especially if I do 1 or 2 hours of sports every day, I'm easily above 3,000 calories. But yeah, there's many calculators online that can help you determine how many calories you need. It all depends on what you currently weigh, how much muscle mass that you have compared to your fat mass. Muscle burns more fat calories than just fat does. Even though fat, believe it or not, it does burn a little bit. It's just very small in comparison to muscle mass. I'll post a couple of links to calculators in the link below, so you can gauge for yourself. But going back to the original point, total calories matter most. What matters second then is your macronutrient ratio. And when it comes to the macronutrients, proteins, carbs, and fats, I kind of like to start off with your protein requirements, and then secondly your fat requirements, and the rest you can kind of fill up how you want, carbs, fats, or proteins. Now, why do I choose proteins and fats? Well, it's because we can't create these ourselves in our body. We need to get proteins and fats from our diet. We can't get them any other way. Carbs, strictly speaking, if you go on a keto diet, or zero, very low carb, we can create ketones, we can create some carbs too. So, very strictly speaking, we don't need carbs. Although I do recommend getting in carbs, just for better functioning, not just cognitive function. Your brain, for example, needs a lot of glucose to function, but also your performance at the gym will be better. You'll be able to keep high performance endurance activities much better with more carbs. So I know lately there's you see on Facebook, social media, a lot of magazines. The keto diet seem very, very popular again, even though this diet it's been around for decades already. It's nothing new. People are just repackaging it in different format, and of course it does work. And one of the successes about this diet is that people kind of like it because in the first couple of days and weeks of the diet they get massive progress. Why? Because they're eliminating carbs from their diet. For those of you who don't know, keto diet is just proteins and fats. So you're losing fat because of the decrease in calories, nothing else. You're also you're losing the weight from the fat mass that is getting burned, but you're also losing a lot of weight from the water mass that leaves your body. And if you go on a protein and fats diet, you get rid of carbs. You have to remember, for every gram of carbs that are stored in your body, you store 3 grams of water. So as you get rid of the carbs in your glycogen stores, your sugar stores in your body, you're also getting rid of a lot of water. So a lot of water is getting flushed out, and that's what is causing the additional weight loss. So people think, oh wow, my keto diet is working so much better than a diet that has the same amount of calories but has much higher carbs and lower fat. Because they look at the weight, they don't look at the body composition. And so that's why many times they stick to those diets, and that's why these diets, they sell really well. But that is really the only reason. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not anti-keto, yeah? It comes down to personal preference mostly, and if you kind of prefer eating a low fat, high fat, high protein diet, low carbs, and you prefer that, you perform well, also in terms of brain function, then by all means go for that. I mean, some people, they do find that, they do perform better, at least the first couple of weeks on a low carb diet. But also determines, whether people like a diet or not often is when they, is the difference between how they were eating before to like the new one. So like if you come from a crappy diet and you're eating like crazy high sugars and and a lot of fat and a lot of processed foods, and you're continually throughout the day getting like these massive sugar spikes and then energy slumps, and that's pretty much your day, and you just feel half asleep half the time and you feel like completely wired and buzzed up the rest of the time. And then you switch to something like keto. I mean, all of a sudden your performance in all areas of your life will increase dramatically. Although you could really have the same performance if you wouldn't go that extreme, you could still maintain like a moderate amount of carbs and just have a moderate amount of the other macronutrients too. I mean, ultimately, what is most important is finding a diet that you enjoy and something that you can maintain and sustain for the rest of your life, ideally. And if there are periods where you want to lose fat or build some muscle, that you only have to make a couple of tiny tweaks to your eating style and not have to radically do something completely different. Even though sometimes I am for like a radical change in somebody's life if they're coming from a very crap diet, for example, because sometimes I find when people, after years and years of eating crap or not training, sometimes they come to the point where the hatred and the anger, the frustration that they experience from having eaten and trained so badly is so high that they just want a radical change. And that just making a small little change at the same time, for some people is good, but sometimes it's also, I think it's good to make a radical difference to like immediately go from something crap to something really good, especially if you can find that you can sustain that for a couple of weeks. It takes a couple of weeks to build a new habit. So if you can do that, and if that motivation is still high to go from like something really crap to something good, do it that way. Anyways, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent. I'll talk more about habits and mindset around that in another video another day. But going back to the nutritional habits then. Now, one of the habits that I recommend is to get some protein on every meal. And how you want to divide this up is really up to you. I kind of like, starting with, my daily protein intake, and I recommend anywhere between 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight to about 2 grams per kilogram per body weight, even though you don't need that much. I mean, 1.5 is, seems like, the minimal optimal amount. Going higher won't do any harm. Even going a little bit lower than 1.5 grams per kilogram, won't do anything bad. It kind of depends also, where you're at in terms of training but also what you enjoy. But to have a guy like 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram, body weight of protein, and divide that up as you want. I think the easiest thing is to just kind of divide it equally between different meals. You can also include it in a shake, of course. Secondly, also there's our fat intake, and for that I recommend between 0.6 and 0.8 grams of fat per kilogram of body weight. Again, I ideally have a bit with each meal, maybe a little less around your training, especially before your training, because fats can be like a little heavier to on the body and more difficult to digest, and it's not something that you don't want a very high fat meal before training. It's gonna make your training much worse. But pretty much the rest of the day, kind of split it as you like. Now, there are times, of course, when you might want to move around your macronutrients a little bit, again, depending on training. But even depending on things like, on how you want to function mentally. So, for example, some people, they get more creative with more carbs. Some people get more analytical, with numbers, especially, for example, with lower carbs and like a high fat, high protein. It's also quite person dependent. But some you might, for example, want to start with like a, higher protein and higher fats in the morning, lower carbs and then move higher carbs to around your workouts, higher carbs to the evening, or vice versa if that works better for you. Yeah. One little advantage with, for example, having more carbs in the evening is that they will help you sleep better. Carbs to give your serotonin a little boost helps you sleep better. So personally, I function best with high protein and moderate fat in the morning, and then kind of like move my carbs further to the rest of the day, and then also have lower fat around my workout, and medium moderate fat at night. But again, nutrient timing isn't that important. It's definitely not as important as was once thought, 10, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. Even things like, that anabolic window of opportunity after your workout, when, the moment you drop the last set of weights on the ground, you have to down your protein shake, getting the fast carbs, getting the fast protein. It's not really going to make that big of a difference. I personally like having, a shake after the workout just because it's part of my workout ritual. It's convenient, it's easy, getting in some liquid nutrition, easy to digest. And also personally, if I can't eat a solid meal after my workout, and I actually believe that if you've had a really intense workout at the gym, for example, that, it shouldn't be very easy, I find, in my opinion, if you've trained well with high intensity. You don't want to eat anything solid for at least an hour after your workout. That's how I think about it, yeah. I believe that if you can eat right after, solid food after your workout, you didn't train hard enough, not intense enough. But again, if you can do that and you function well, by all means, do what you want, yeah. So yeah, nutrient timing, not a big deal, especially not for fat loss or maintenance. Maybe a little more for muscle building, like there is more evidence that points to the fact that if you want to build a lot of muscle, especially when you're already quite big, that it is better to eat a little more frequently. But you could lose fat or maintain, through like an intermittent fasting style of eating, where you eat, only 3 or 2 or even 1 meal a day, in the span of a couple of hours. So nutrient timing definitely not as important as it once was, and same with meal frequency, except for maybe when you want to build muscle. Now, one other habit that I recommend is to have some form of greens with every meal, and ideally you get this from vegetables. Second most ideal would be, fruits, and specifically berries, very, very good option always. Or, and if you don't have access to either, maybe even like a greens powder, which is basically, ground up wheatgrass and ground different type of grass, different type of berries and vegetable powders really. So you're getting a lot of goodness that comes from the actual solid fruit or solid vegetable in just powdered format. So for example, let's say, you're out of time and you can only make like a quick shake, add in a greens powder, and you're getting a ton of extra vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients, and all of that. The only time that maybe I wouldn't recommend getting in at least not fibrous vegetables or too fibrous fruits is around your workouts, because again, if your stomach, your gut is full of fiber before a workout, that's going to affect your workout. You're still going to be digesting and stuff, because it takes much longer to digest. Around your workout is when you want to keep to simpler foods. Less fatty, less fiber. Now, one other little rule that I have is, and this is more specifically for fat loss, maybe also for maintenance, is to stick mostly to 0-calorie drinks. So I'll drink mostly just water. It can be flavored water or fruit infused water, lemon water, stuff like that. Coffee, tea. Except for shakes, of course, and the occasional super. So, and why is that? Especially for fat loss, is it's very easy to over consume and have get in a lot of calories when you're just drinking them. You can have like a couple of glasses of fruit juice or some other high calorie beverage, and you can drink that in a couple of seconds. Whereas if you'd eat the equivalent in terms of actual solid food, you might be eating 5, 6, 7 orange or something, which is not something that you're likely to do. And getting in all that extra fiber, you're going to fill up much faster eating the solid stuff, which is especially important when you want to lose fat, because ideally you want to stay keeping full for as long as possible so that you're not hungry. Now, when it comes to food selection, I'm not somebody who says like you should never eat that, you should always eat that. I believe in personal freedom when it comes to eating what you want to eat, though I would recommend to stick to as much as possible single ingredient foods that make up the bulk of what you're eating. Yeah, so minimize stuff that is processed or that has a lot of additives, hormones, antibiotics, all that other stuff. So try keep it as natural as possible when it comes to food selection. Possibly the only thing that I would say to try and eliminate from your diet, indefinitely always, that would be trans fats. Trans fats, they go by different names in different products, but sometimes they go by hydrogenated oils or palm fat oil, stuff like that. Get rid of that. Trans fats are basically an altered structure of fat, and once you get it in it's a type of fat that is more difficult to eliminate. It's actually very unhealthy, and you know, they're banning it in some regions already, but I'd be happy to see like a full-on ban on that. But that's pretty much the only thing. I do believe like the other types of foods, I mean, of course, minimize all the chemicals and additives and stuff like that, but you know, if you fancy like a pizza or something else that is a little more processed once in a while, by all means, you know, it can be part of your eating, yeah? You know, if it's like an extra, which kind of brings me like, you know, to another rule is try and stick to like, you know, good eating about 90% of the time, you know, give or take, and let yourself, you know, I mean, if once in a while, a Friday night or wherever else on a social occasion, you want to have that cake or whatever, if you've eaten well for like the rest of the time, then once in a while you can easily afford to eat a bit of junk, and it's not going to have any negative effect on your health or your fat loss or your muscle building. Now, one thing that I would recommend people to do, especially in the West, is that if you are eating low in if you're not eating fatty fish or flaxseed oil or walnut, stuff like that, is to do supplement with omega-3, because that is something that a lot of people are very deficient in, and it is absolutely necessary to get, you know, adequate amounts of this in your diet too, because, you know, the benefits of omega-3 are just so high. So get in a bit of that too. Guys, hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments or suggestions, please post them below. I'll definitely take a look at them, and if you like the video, give it a like, make sure that you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, and give it a share with your friends. Thanks, see you next time.